The 911 call you are about to hear is upsetting. Some viewers will want to skip forward.
Where are you, ma'am?
Please just don't know. I don't know where my parents are.
Ma'am, calm down. What?
Some people broke into our house and they just showed all his money. And I can hear my parents yelling downstairs. Please send help.
Ma'am, where are you? What?
Avenue.
Avenue Road.
Yes.
Can you spell the street name for me, please?
Dad? I'm calling her.
Ma'am. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Ma'am, I need to know your address. Avenue Road. Can you please spell it?
In Helen Avenue, my dad just went outside screaming.
Ma'am, can you spell the street address for me, please?
H-E-L-E-N. Someone broke in and I heard shots like pops. I don't know what's happening. I'm tied upstairs.
When York Regional Police responded to the nice, quiet Markham, Ontario neighborhood, they found Mr. Pan suffering from gunshot wounds. He was rushed to hospital in critical condition. They entered the house and found Mrs. Pan's body in the basement. Mr. and Mrs. Pan's daughter, Jennifer, was found upstairs, tied to a banister. Mr. Pan was unable to make a statement and then afterwards was in a coma. The only witness left was Jennifer. The following is the first of a series of interviews of Jennifer by a detective along with analysis.
So today's the 9th of November, 2010. On my watch, 2:44 a.m. Now I want you to sort of take yourself back to earlier on today, yesterday, meaning the 8th of November, and tell me about your day. Okay, start at any point in time, wherever you feel comfortable, and then we're gonna move forward. Okay.
Yesterday, probably around 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30. My mother, she woke me up and she told me that she was going to visit my grandfather, who was ill, and that she was going to go over pick up my aunt to go. Once we stepped out of the house, there were a few police officers barricading the driveway, and so she called me down, and when I came down, the officers just said that there was like a gas leak in the area, and they were just as precaution evacuating. And before we could walk over to a safer place, they said that the evacuation had been moved to somewhere else, that it was safe to go back home. With that, my mom decided for me to stay home, and because I have some piano history stuff that I'm working on. So I was doing that on the computer, played a little piano. I forget what time my mom came home, probably around like 3:30. My father came home later than usual. He said that he had forgot to lock a toolbox and had to turn back, but I'm not exactly sure. He just was home later than usual.
Okay.
Once he came home, he phoned up my uncle and asked him to go to buy USB pen, I think, just to go shopping with him because my uncle doesn't drive. They left, so my mom had prepared dinner because she was heading to go dancing that night, line dancing. She does it every Monday. And so her and I sat down for dinner first. And then after my father came home, he did that. And then a friend of mine came over. We do TV night every so often. So my dad, I guess, went up on the computer as he always does. And I was downstairs with my friend watching movies. And my mom was out dancing. My friend left around 9, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I upstairs in my room, called it a night with the TV on, talking on the phone with a friend of mine. And then shortly after, my mom came home. I believe that was around 9:30 or so. She was rummaging downstairs. I didn't think anything of it. And then suddenly I just heard my mom calling for my dad to come down. And that's when I lowered the volume on my TV. And I could hear the voices weren't any voices I was very familiar with. And so I was scared and I couldn't move. I just sat in my room for a while. And then I thought I heard them all leave the top floor, and I peered out of my bedroom door.
If she's going to think or feel anything at all at hearing unfamiliar voices speaking with her mother, why would she go straight to fear? Why not curiosity, if anything? So that says something right there. And I'm sure the detective picks up on this. If he's smart, he won't say so. But it begs the question, what is making her afraid? She thought she heard them all leave the top floor. Wait a minute, who's they, and when did they all go upstairs to the top floor? She heard the unfamiliar voices downstairs. So there's a gap in the story here. If she was afraid by hearing unfamiliar voices a floor below her, would that fear not increase if she hears them coming up the stairs? Witnesses having gaps in the story is not unusual. And most of the time it's because they forgot a detail or they didn't understand that it was important. Where they don't leave gaps is when there is something emotional tied to the event. So if something makes you afraid, that is not something you leave out. Gaps in a witness's story aren't always significant, but this one is.
And a guy was there and he came at me and had string in his hands and tied my arms back and said, "I have a gun behind your back."
Had string in his hands? This sounds like a prepared narrative more than a memory. The focus would be on the guy coming at her, not the detail of the string at this point. And we're talking about string, not rope, not a weapon. What's missing in this part of the story? What's missing is her, how she feels, what she did. Did she back up? Did she scream? Did she yell for her parents? Did she struggle? Anything? That's missing. How did he subdue her, considering he had string in his hands and not a weapon, and he didn't tell her about a weapon or produce a weapon at this time? And if his goal was to subdue her, then why not produce the gun first? This is another important gap, and it doesn't quite hang together. And for him to be outside of her room carrying a tool of restraint, he would have had to have known that she was there in order to think, I need to bring a restraint and go restrain this person. So that begs another question. How does he know that she's there? And why string? Why not something simpler and more effective? The police know that home invasions that are not targeted are extraordinarily rare. Personally, in all my years of working, I haven't even heard of one. The intruder knowing that she was there and that he needed to restrain her just bolsters the idea that this was a targeted attack. They usually are.
Do what I say. If you do what I say, then no one will get hurt. Where is the money? Show me where your money is.
He's asking her for the money. First of all, why is he asking her and not the parents? And the money is very specific. So is there a cache of money somewhere in the house that maybe somebody found out about? That's where the detective's going to be going in his head based on what she's saying. And note, she puts her head down here and she doesn't continue with the story. Sometimes victims will pause like this if the next part of the story is particularly traumatic or if it's embarrassing and difficult to tell, such as an SA case. The posture and pause tells the detective that there is something to delve into here. It doesn't tell him what it is, it just tells him there's something. And note, the detective doesn't interrupt her. He doesn't try and hurry her along. He doesn't ask a different question. He lets the pause be. In the next section, the pause continues. And I've left it in so you can feel how long that is. And imagine that you're the detective working on this case and you have a number of killers running around at large and it's your job to catch them. You're going to be in a hurry to solve this thing. And it would be easy to be impatient. but a good quality for a detective is patience. And the tactic he uses is perfect. One of my favorites. It's silence.
I have still a bit of money put aside from when I was waitressing, cash. So I showed him where it was, and he took it and put it in his pocket, I think. And then that's where they pushed me to my parents' room and asked me where the money was there, and I didn't really know.
In the middle of recounting this shocking and terrifying situation, she provides an explanation, which is she had money put aside from waitressing. Some people are like this, but it's usually a way to delay. And remember, at the very beginning of the interview, he'd asked her, tell me about your day that day. And she gave a narrative, and that's her baseline. So it is out of baseline. And considering the pause immediately preceding this, this should be read as delay. Delay doesn't always mean lying. It can mean a number of things, but it doesn't mean nothing. It's another cue for the detective. And she thinks he put the money in his pocket? What pocket? Jeans? A jacket? And when she says, that's where, and she describes the event, she's not describing a place. She's saying, this is where in the story that this thing happened. She doesn't say, that's when or then. That's where in the story. They pushed me. Where did they come from? Because first it was a guy, singular, and then suddenly it's they, plural.
So they kind of like, one was right beside me, blocking my way to the door, while the other ones turned over the bed to find some more cash in my mom's bedside table. In which then they dragged me down the stairs and made me kneel at the bottom, telling me to face down on the floor while the other guy had a gun behind my head.
They kind of like, and one was right beside me. He just appeared there, and she's not asking where her parents are. The intruders are not taking the parents into their room and asking where their money is. They're asking the daughter. One blocked the door, so she couldn't get away. The other ones, plural. So now we know there's at least 3, right? One blocking the door and at least 2, because it's plural, in the room. Where are the parents? Are there more people in the house? Who's guarding the parents? How are the parents being subdued? How are they being kept quiet? They turned the bed to find more cash in Mom's nightstand. Was this a misspeak because she's stressed out? It's possible. I don't think so, but that would be another thing to clarify. So as the detective is listening, he's going to be making either physical notes or mental notes of all of these little things. And then there's this long pause, and she says, in which then? If you heard that differently, let me know. One might expect a pause just before they had her kneel, but that's not where the pause is. The pause is right before a section of narrative, rather than before a terrifying or embarrassing moment. This is not about trauma. This is something else. And they made her kneel and face down on the floor. Which was it? And how did she know there was a gun behind her head? Did she feel it? Did they tell her that? How does she know that? This sounds more like somebody describing a movie. It's visual. And they're describing a movie that they're seeing from the outside, not something she's experiencing from that point, her point of view. This is all wrong here.
And asked my mom where her purse was.
Wait, what? She's either kneeling or face down on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. Where's Mom? And why are they having Jennifer ask about the purse? Mom speaks English. And if Mom can answer, why has she been quiet all this time when armed intruders are upstairs with her daughter? Where's Dad? Is he there? She's not mentioning that. The emotion in Jennifer's voice here is coming at the point where she's told she has to ask her mom about the purse. There's no mention of seeing mom hurt or crying or bound or anything. And again, that would be emotionally tied into the memory. That would be seared into your brain, that vision. You would say that. Can you imagine being told, believing that there's a gun at the back of your head and you're being told to kneel on the floor? How terrifying would that be? There's no emotion tied to that. The emotion is tied to asking her mother about the purse. This is weird. It's off. There was one thing that really jumped out at me during the 911 call, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt. We're just minutes into the actual interview, and already there's a lot that doesn't make sense. I am already convinced that at best, she knows much more than what she's saying here. And she is likely involved in the crime. None of these issues are lost on the detective. An untrained person would want to challenge or confront on all these things, but this detective knows what he's doing.
My mom kept trying to get up, and they kept telling her, sit down, and so I didn't want her to get hurt, so I told her, Mom, sit down. They were trying to find her wallet, but her English isn't good, so she kept saying purse. They kept pushing her down onto the chair.
Okay. Take your time. Take your time. All this is very important, so take your time.
They kept all the lights off on the main floor. The only time there was light was when they opened the fridge door to see if they could find where my mom's purse was.
She went from describing events to an explanatory justification or narrative.
At that point, I saw 3 figures of men. One with a hoodie, like the one I could see the most clearly, he had a hoodie on, and I believe he had a bandana of some sort covering from like his lower, under his eyes down. And then, for some reason, I think one of the gentlemen asked my father if he had money in his wallet and where his wallet was. So they took me, because I was next to the stairwell, they took me up the stairs to show them where my father's wallet was. But I didn't know. They had turned the room upside down. I didn't know where his pants were at that time.
Ugh. Red flags galore. At that point, she saw 3 figures. But she'd just been upstairs with at least 3 men. She'd been able to see well enough to notice one had string in his hand. She says the lights were off on the main floor, so not upstairs. There is no question now that she saw them and she's hiding it. One of the gentlemen, not thugs or monsters or even guys or men, gentlemen. Does anyone remember the Richard Merritt trial? I've got a playlist on his case. During his testimony, he repeatedly referred to the killers, which was himself, as gentlemen. This one thing right here tells me now, not only does she know more than she's saying, she's involved. And what's going on here? Dad's suddenly there. When she described arriving at the bottom of the stairs, there was no mention of Dad. Mom and Dad are like characters who appear and disappear as they're needed. Does that mean Dad answered and that's where the wallet is? Or that he didn't answer and they decided to search for the wallet? And if that's the case, why did they go straight to that bedroom? Would a father not say, hey, here's where the money is? Take it, right? People in these situations, they want these intruders to leave. All of a sudden, all your prized possessions, they don't matter.
And then after they had gotten that, they had taken me and they tied me to the top of the banister. Just with one string, I could still move, but I was afraid to because the one guy just had that gun.
She didn't know where in the room the wallet was, yet these intruders found it. They'd already tossed the room, and she's wanting this detective to believe that they tossed the room and didn't find the wallet the first time when it was just in the guy's pants? And why are these home invaders using a piece of string of all the things to use? And they are upstairs with her. Well, then how are the parents being subdued? If mom kept trying to get up when Jennifer was down there, if the perpetrators leave and have her daughter, do you think she's just going to sit there quietly? There's something missing. You know, mom's able to try to get up. Is dad not trying to get up? Home invaders will ensure that the biggest threat is neutralized in some way first. And usually that's the men in the house. We're not hearing that here. They left dad down there and went upstairs with her. In a straight home invasion for the purpose of robbery, the perpetrators usually keep all of the victims in one place. It's easier just to control them all. If the victims are being separated, that's cause for great alarm because it means there's something else going on. And the intention is more than mere robbery. Victims in these crimes sense this, even if they don't know anything about crime. And this string thing, I'm sorry, the string thing is really getting me. The police can analyze the knot. Officers are trained to cut bindings rather than untie them for this reason. And as far as moving or not moving, it is common for victims to feel frozen or not to move, even though they're able because they're afraid. It's also common for victims to explain this. They're often embarrassed because they think back and think, well, why didn't I do X, Y, Z? That's never useful thinking. But notice the context here. She can't finish the sentence because she doesn't have that bit of narrative detail. Also note that when victims want to tell you something and they trail off, they'll think for a minute and they'll try again to tell you. When something is really significant to a victim and they want to tell you something, you pretty much can't stop them. Sometimes they practically vomit out the story and you have to slow them down so you can make sense of it. They can't wait to get that story out to tell you what happened, especially if you're there to help. That's not this.
Next thing I know, I think I heard my parents going down the stairs, and my mom was asking them for me to come with them. They wouldn't let me come with them.
The next thing I know, no, it isn't. She doesn't describe them leaving her. So she's upstairs. Parents are on the main floor. Parents are being taken to the basement. I would bet that mom was expressing concern for her daughter.
After they said, the last things I heard them say was, you lied to us, you lied to us. And then I heard 2 pops. My mom screamed. I yelled out for her. And a couple more pops.
Take your time. Take your time.
And I think I heard my mom say or moan or something, and then they did one more before they left, and then one of the guys said, we have to go now. It's been too long.
Earlier, she said she heard unfamiliar voices. Those voices were only 1 floor below her, yet she doesn't describe hearing yelling or demands or any specific words. So how is she hearing this? A gunshot in a confined space, like inside the house, sounds different than it sounds outside, and it would be louder indoors. A .357 caliber produces 164.3 decibels. A .38 produces 158.3 decibels. For comparison, a jackhammer is 130 decibels. A rock concert is between 90 and 120 decibels. Having said that, officers doing active shooter response training have on occasion, had trouble finding the location of the simulated shooter based on sound alone, and in some cases didn't hear any sound at all. But those are in big buildings. Different calibers will make different sounds. Anyway, my point here is that if the gunshots from a .357 sound like pops because of the sound variables, how then can she hear the intruders speaking? With the sound variables such that they would reduce the sound of a gunshot, how does she hear her mother speak or moan? She's 2 floors up. They did one more. Odd way to put that. They're not hearing horror. They shot her. Or, I heard the pops. I was afraid they were gunshots. There's no horror. She's just kind of hurrying up and getting past this part of the story.
And then they ran out the door. And I think once they were out the door, I heard my dad go up the stairs, and at that point I had my phone on me, behind me.
She didn't say she heard them run out the door, just that they ran out the door. That might not mean anything, but I'm already thinking that she's not saying she didn't hear it because she didn't hear it. She knew they ran out the door. If their goal is to rob and they're angry at the victims for lying, why do they shoot them both instead of just one in order to make the other one talk? And they don't go back to Jennifer either to get money. This shows that the primary goal was not robbery. And she has a phone, but while she was alone, she didn't use it. The bad guys didn't do anything to prevent anyone from making phone calls. That's one of the things early on that home invaders do, is to make sure that you can't get to a phone. And notice she starts to say she had her phone in her pocket. But then she changes it to she had her phone on her. She was wearing yoga pants. There are no pockets. Sounds like she realized that and quickly switched that over. And if she had her phone on her and she's wearing yoga pants, so there's no pockets, how does she keep her phone on her through all of this? Somebody ought to call a plumber because she's full of it.
That I had hidden there that they didn't know about. So when I thought that they had heard them all leave and my dad ran up the stairs, I whipped up the phone and I called 911. But I still hadn't heard anything from my mom, and all I could hear was my dad running on the street, just moaning and making sounds. And that's pretty much what I've...
So what happens? Continue on from now to the point that the police arrive.
I was just on the phone with the secretary or the operator. I begged her not to leave me alone. And then my dad was outside. I was yelling at him, but he wouldn't come in. I don't know if he didn't hear me, he didn't come in. I think he went to look for help. And I didn't get to see my dad at all until before I left the hospital just now.
I whipped out the phone, but she's tied up. How is it so easy that she can whip out the phone? And this actually explains why a few minutes ago she said they tied me with string and I could move a little bit, because she knows she's going to have to explain how she can move to whip out the phone. That's my guess. So she whips out the phone. Well, if it was that easy, why didn't she call before? Why didn't she call when they'd left her alone? And how does she know it's Dad coming up the stairs and not one of the bad guys? How does she know everybody ran out of the house if she didn't see that happen? There are lots of cases where a victim will remain in the house, remain in a hiding spot for a long time after the perpetrator leaves because they're terrified that either they're watching or that there's somebody still in the house. They're not so sure. She's pretty confident. And notice when she whips out this phone. It's when she hears her dad. What was her plan if he had not survived?
How did you get free?
The cop came and he snip the two strings off for me. I was asking them for so long, and they said they couldn't untie me until they knew how to properly untie the string.
Okay. So we've gone through a very tough portion, and now we're sort of going to go back clinically. You know, I want you to put yourself now as a figure looking down at what you see. Okay. So you go back. You're up in your room at 9:30, correct?
Like 9:30.
You're on the phone. Who are you on the phone with?
With a friend of mine, an old coworker.
An old coworker. Are you on the phone with that person when you hear these voices that you don't recognize?
Yes.
And do you remain on the phone with this person, or when does that conversation end?
It ended when I heard my mother asking my father to come down the stairs. And normally they don't communicate very well sometimes. So what I did was I told my friend I'll call you back. And I hung up, stuck the phone in the back pocket, and started to go up the door. And that's when I noticed that there were men running around.
At the beginning of this interview, she said she talked on the phone to a friend, and then shortly after, her mom came home. Then she heard mom call to dad, and then she lowered the volume on her TV. The phone call was already over. When there's a strange or shocking event, you might not know what time it was, but you do know what you were doing in that moment. So it's telling that she would mix this up. She says, stuck phone in back pocket. This is a shortened sentence, and she's taken out the pronouns, which is notable because this is not how she speaks. She knows she didn't stick her phone in her back pocket. She had no back pocket. She was wearing yoga pants. And she knows she has to explain how the heck she was able to call 911 while she's tied up to a banister. She's putting that in there so that she has an explanation for later when she needs to pull that phone. And here she says she started to go to the door. This is different from peeking out the door, as she said only 20 minutes ago. And what's missing? She's missing the sound of unfamiliar voices, missing how she was scared by this and didn't move, sat on her bed for a while. My guess is that the only part that's true here is that mom called out for dad. Also, earlier she'd said she peeked out the door and there was a man and he had string in his hand and he came at her. Now she's saying she just noticed that there were men running around. Remember, she's not on the main floor. She's upstairs. If there are men running around in your house, would you use the word, yeah, I noticed that? So different stories. The affect doesn't match with the story.
Okay. So let's back up again. When you hear your mom come, do you hear your mom in the house?
She was in the house. I had gone down the stairs.
Did you hear, so before this is when did you hear your mom for the first time in the house?
When she came home.
And what time was that?
9:15.
Is there a time period? So, and where's your father at that time?
He's just finishing on the computer, I think, and he was heading to bed.
So, did you physically see your mom?
Yes.
And at that time, there was no one strange in the house?
No, she was on the downstairs sofa. She was watching TV when I last saw her.
Okay. Where is so between that time that you see her and you leave her on the sofa until you hear the noises, the strange, the voices as you describe them, how long is that?
Maybe a half hour.
A half an hour?
Here we go with another inconsistency. I had gone down the stairs and saw her mom on the couch watching TV. This is new. In 3 tellings of this up to now, she has told 3 different stories. Just so you know, I've cut out the next section because it's long. It's Jennifer and the detective talking about where mom goes for line dancing. Mom goes line dancing every Monday night. They talk about where her parents work and that sort of thing. And we're skipping that part.
So, 9:15, you see your mom down on the downstairs couch, and you see your dad. He's at the
computer.
And where is the computer located?
Upstairs, right beside his room.
Right
He's in a separate room beside his room.
Okay. And you're going to bed. You're going up to your room to watch TV and turn down for the night.
Yeah.
And then approximately, again, how long later that you hear these voices?
My mom had to be home for maybe 20 minutes. Don't really have that window. I think around like maybe 9:40.
9:40? Okay. Estimates is fine. Yeah, I'm not expecting to hold you down to times because we can probably get that from who you were speaking to, right? Because how long after you end the conversation with the person do you hear the voices?
They're already in the house.
So you end the conversation because you hear the voices. You'll call the person back.
Yeah, because I heard my dad and then I heard some strange voices when I was like, I'll call you back.
And who was it that you were speaking to?
A coworker of mine.
And what's that name? So, what is it that you hear that causes your father to go downstairs?
My mother calling for him.
And what is she speaking in English or is she speaking in another language?
She was speaking in English, which is why it also caught my attention.
What language does she normally speak?
At home we speak a mix of like Vietnamese is most fluent, but we do throw some Chinese words here and there.
Okay.
Or English words here and there.
But the vast majority of it is Vietnamese? What is the first, when you hear this, can you hear them talking downstairs, the unknown voices?
It's all a mumble.
It's a mumble?
Because I had the TV on, it was just all a mumble.
When's the first time that you actually can hear one of them talking?
When he was upstairs, and I thought he had left the upstairs, because I was frozen in my room for a while.
Yeah.
Trying to listen in, but I couldn't hear over my TV, and I didn't want to startle them by turning it off or like diminishing the volume. So I was kind of pressed up against my door for a while trying to hear it. And I thought that all the people upstairs had gone down, so I opened up my door quietly and tried to peer out, and he saw me.
Wait a minute. There are voices downstairs. Now she thought they all went downstairs. So at what point were they upstairs? And she has again changed the story about peeking out the door.
And that's when he came.
Did you have lights on in your room at that time?
My lights were off. I only had the reflection off my TV, which is lower to the door.
What do you see of this guy? And I'm calling him a guy because you said you thought they were all males.
I think they were all 3 males.
Okay, so tell me about this guy.
She thinks they were all male? We should expect to hear why she doesn't actually know.
He was medium build.
Okay.
I don't remember any of his clothing, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunate. None of his clothing, despite prolonged contact. Many victims talk about how the perpetrator smells. We're not hearing any of that so far. Let's see if that comes up.
The only thing I can remember was he had dreadlocks.
He had dreadlocks. So can you describe his race to me?
He was black.
Was his head covered? Was his face covered? Do you remember anything about that?
Just that his dreadlocks were kind of flopping all over the place. I couldn't really see his face, and they kept the lights dark as much as possible.
How long were the dreadlocks? Were they like when you say they're dreadlocks and they were flopping all over his face?
It's hard. I don't remember 100%. I think some of them were around his face were a little shorter,
mm-hmm.
and then in the back there were longer ones.
Okay. Now his complexion, there's various degrees of dark to medium dark to actually light.
I'd say I wouldn't say he was the darkest person I've seen, but he was on the darker side.
Any facial hair?
I'd like to say maybe...
Say
Not
only what you can
100%
think.
sure.
Just say what you think. I don't want you to say what you're...
But I don't want to say something wrong.
Exactly. So if you don't know, then it's okay to say. It's okay to say that. Okay, so can you give an age approximation for this guy?
Well, when the other officer asked me, I was leaning along the ages of 28 to 33.
So someone who's established in life.
I would assume so.
Like not established meaning world, meaning that he's been around. So a 20-year-old talks completely different than a 30-year-old, as you know.
He seemed to be the one in charge.
He seemed to be running the show?
He's the one that had me. Like, he pretty much did not let me go. He was in charge of me. And all the money I showed him, he pocketed.
Okay. Did he have a gun? Did you see the gun?
I only saw the top part of the gun.
What did it look like?
Kind of, it was black.
Yeah.
And it kind of, not triangular, but it was slightly wider at the end than it was closer.
Do you know the difference between what a pistol and a revolver is?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know if it was a pistol or a revolver?
That particular one that he was holding, I believe, should have been a pistol.
A pistol. Okay.
Because the difference is the round part, right?
So you tell me what's a pistol and what's a revolver. Which one has the round part?
I would think that the revolver has the ones that the bullets go around.
Okay.
And it didn't look like that. It looked like more like a handgun.
So it looked more like a pistol?
Yes.
What you're saying, not a revolver?
No. The other gentleman, though.
We'll go to the other gentleman. We'll go this in stages so that we're not doing... We'll call this guy number one because you're saying that he seemed to be running the show. He was in control.
From my perspective, yes.
He was in control of you.
Yes.
Is this the gentleman? Is this the guy who tied you up?
Yes.
Okay. I want you to...
He was the one that tied my wrist together. He wasn't the one that tied me to the banister.
Okay. So where did he get the shoelaces? Or whatever the laces were, or whatever it was that tied you up?
I'm not sure. It might have been from my mother's room or the study room, or because my mom has a sewing table next to her bed.
Smart question by the detective here. Her answer raises more questions. If any version of her story is true, the only possible answer is I don't know. But she proffers an answer that reveals she knows he didn't bring those laces with him. And that begs the question of, again, why somebody planning a home invasion wouldn't bring along the restraints. And how would this stranger know where to look for shoelaces? And if you're really going to use shoelaces, why would you go look for clean ones in a sewing drawer and not just rip them out of shoes that are at the door or something? I could go on about how bad this story is, but I think I'd be telling you things that you're probably already thinking. Is that plumber coming or what?
So when you open the door, where is this guy?
He was just stepping out of my brother's, well, what formula would be my brother's room.
So he's already on the upstairs?
Yeah.
Do you know where the other guys involved in this are?
I know one stayed with my parents downstairs.
Oh, really? How does she know this? She peeked out the door and a man came at her with string. She went to go out the door of her room and noticed men running around. There was one and then there were three. But one stays downstairs.
Okay.
The other one, I'm not, at that point in time, I was more focused on him, like he was seeing me and he was coming after me.
So you're saying there's three for sure? Yes. That's all, you saw a total of three at one time, you saw three people together?
Yes, when I went downstairs, I saw three shadows.
When I went downstairs, not when they took me downstairs. She went downstairs under her own steam. She just told the detective that without realizing.
Okay, so this number one guy, and we're calling him number one because he was the one who tied you up, and he's the first one that you actually are confronted by. And he comes out of your brother's room, what was formerly your brother's room, and he comes into your room.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in there?
He tells me to sit down,
And
he shows me his gun.
So it's not pointing at you, but you see
Not
it.
yet.
And where is it?
It's like in a holster almost.
Okay.
And then he showed it to me, and he's like, "Don't move." And then someone else brought him the shoelace.
So now he didn't come at her with a string in his hands. And he didn't go get it from Mom's sewing box or the other room. Now someone else brought it to him. And how did this someone else know to do this and where to find it? And it is a shoelace. For pity's sake.
Okay, can you describe the other person who brings the shoelace?
He was the second person and the only other person that I encountered with.
Okay.
I only saw the third guy, but he didn't encounter with me at all.
Okay.
He had a hoodie and like a bandana over his face.
Yeah.
His complexion, and it was really dark, but I could tell that he was darker than the first guy.
So he's a male black as well.
But thinner build.
But thinner build. So we got a medium build, thin build, and what about the height? Where are we in height scales? How tall are you?
5'7".
So where are they in comparison to you?
I'd say one was pretty much right around my height level.
And which guy is that?
The medium build.
The first guy you encounter who shows you the gun.
Yeah.
And eventually ties your wrists together. He's about your height, so he's somewhere in the area 6 to 5'8", 5'6" to 7".
I'd say.
Okay.
And the other guy, I'd say around 5'8", maybe smidget higher, lower than 8.
So he's taller than you, but not much.
Not much.
Okay. Now the first guy who spoke to you, did he have any accent? Was
None
it clear?
that I could make out.
Was it clear English?
English.
Unbroken.
Unbroken.
No accent.
From the terms he used, I didn't get to pick up an accent. No. He used short phrases.
He sounded Canadian.
I would say yes. He was born here.
He was born here. Okay. So number two guy you see with the bandana, and he's got a darker complexion, and he's thinner,
Yes.
and he's about 5'8".
With a hoodie.
Is it black hoodie or what color is it?
It was all really dark,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming he was wearing black.
What about the bandana? Can you see a color on the bandana?
It was very dark as well.
Okay. Anything distinguishing about his eyes?
I didn't look straight into his eyes, no.
Any other portions of clothing that you recognized?
No, unfortunately.
Okay, how about this guy's language? Did he speak to
He
you?
didn't speak at all.
Nothing.
He just nodded.
He nodded. Who seemed to be giving the directions?
Number one.
First guy you encountered seemed to be telling everyone what to do? From what you can tell. Okay, so now they're both upstairs with you. Where are your parents?
They're in the living room.
How does she know her parents are in the living room?
They're in the living room. And now what happens?
They take me downstairs.
Have they tied you now?
Yeah, the number one has tied me,
Okay.
and now they're taking me down the stairs.
Describe first how he's tied you.
He grabbed my arm, and he pulled it to the back and said, "Give me your other arm as well."
Okay.
And then I was trying to make a wide X so that I could later loosen if I needed it to, but he had pulled really, really tight. And
Okay.
I guess he felt my flinch, and that's when he quickly tied the second knot, I think. I don't exactly know. All I know is I flinched, and then it got tighter.
So you were bound behind you.
Behind me, yes.
Okay. And then you're taken downstairs. Tell me what happens down there.
They sit me right at the bottom of the stairs, slightly out. Not exactly directly at the bottom of the stairwell, but just slightly over a little.
Another change in story. It's normal for story details to change a bit, but significant details attached to emotion don't change. Her first story, she was made to kneel and was told face down on the floor, which would be terrifying. That's missing here. Now she's saying they sat her there. This is very different from being told to kneel with a gun at the back of your head.
And the third guy, who I didn't encounter, but he was there, he was like, "Where's your money? Cooperate with us." And then my mom's like, yelling, and "Don't hurt us. And, my money's in my wallet. Just please leave my paperwork."
About 10 minutes ago, she said that she was told to ask her mother where the purse was. This is a different story. And again, what is Dad doing? There's just too much missing here that would be emotionally significant. Victims mention those emotional things.
This person, this third guy who you're now describing, do you see him ever? Only as a shadow?
Because there's a wall,
Okay.
partial wall, and he was like right in that vision over my father, but partially in that vision.
Wait a minute. She described at least 3 perpetrators in her parents' room with her. One blocking the door, the others, remember, plural, searching the room. She has just said that there were a total of 3 intruders, so that's all of them. Yet here she's saying this is the first time she saw number 3. And does anyone believe that when they were searching the parents' room for money, that they did it in the dark? "Alex, I'll take Home Alone for $200, the detective. "Oh, honey, I think we're going to go with Columbo." I'm going to leave it here and pick up the rest of this interview in the next video. This case gets wild. Stay safe. See you in the comments.